Though outside of how Roots somehow became better, Tokyo's presence does fuck over the events for much of the series narratively by changing how their events play out and individuals are characterized for the worse. For the most part, it sticks with the surface-level depictions of them, completely without nuance, which are thus slipshod in development. The most egregious example I can name that serves as a microcosm of the rest is that directly due to Tokyo's own actions and him effectively taking the Terror of Death's place in his story, Haseo, well, turns into the monster his journey allowed him to avoid and grow past.
It admittedly snowballs from Tabby's idiocy, but in the same kind of way we saw before in the normal depiction of Roots. Haseo shutting himself off from others, as he's repeatedly shown he has no one he can rely on but himself.
Don't ever follow me again.
Meaning we should not have seen the kind of devolution here if the Link AI version of him was really depictive of his persona through the events of his starring entry.
Though I would not be surprised if Tokyo's own special brand of moron in fact compounded things, as I blame him. But either way, it makes going through Jiu's events highly unpleasant.
And think about what I just said. Jiu is my favorite video game of all time. Is the only reason I even started these reviews, or ever cared about the franchise after Legend of the Twilight killed my interest, to even complain about Link existing in the first place. And I don't want to play through the section that focuses on it.
This botched depiction eventually culminates in him attempting to kill Adelie and render her a lost one for daring to bear the same model as Shino after the battle with Innis, only for echoes of the woman to stop him, when from a character perspective, that is something he would never do, even while infected by Ida. As even early on, when he was enthralled by Skaith, he found anyone suffering or threatened with the same fate as Shino abhorrent, his impulsive assault on Team Only One Target notwithstanding, mitigating circumstances there. But this was shown before that, with Adelie losing consciousness when they first encounter Ida, and followed up on continuously, especially in his expressed torment when Skaith ends up used against Alkaid, culminates in his breakdown after Skaith goes rampant fighting Kudamegus, and is reinforced far later on with Alkaid's death and its aftermath as well. All from the trauma born of that first loss, which Link still carries through with.
I don't want to lose any more friends. Not ever again.
And that is on top of other character informative stuff that ends up skipped, downplayed, or screwed over in reenactment of events, even when it's central to them.
The game does show him facing Kun, for example, and thus has the moment for the epiphany that should permanently derail such, and yet Haseo laughs when he renders him comatose, instead of learning the lesson inherent to their encounter. And consequently, the purpose behind the events, and many others that influence his character development, are ignored entirely, despite showing them occurring and implying that they do.
And by the point in the timeline this occurs at, his character had softened, and Adelie had come to be important to him, as she helped him from going too far several times. Doing this here thus becomes straight-up character assassination, and even with the changes, this never once felt justified. Simply done this way to make Tokyo the hero that corrects this misguided man by making him look worse in comparison.
Adelie, wait for me. I promise I'll save you. Stop it, Adelie!
Is this what you were aiming for?
No, Please! I never meant to! Stop, 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 stop!
And that's not even getting into how changing this scene in this manner waylets the culmination of Adley's character journey, despite it being a really big damn part of GU's narrative, which I could go for a while on simply from how this insulted me concerning the nature of my empathy with Chigusa Kusaka. And if I was legitimately trying to break down every changed event here that detracted from the depiction of the prior parts of the franchise and its characters, we would be here all day, even with this level of translation.
And it's not like they could not be condensed down while retaining their merits. Hell, I've made 40 videos based on that premise alone with just this franchise. And many do try to, but fall short of compensating for the changes.
Though if you take the view of this story being a Quantum Leap-esque, setting right what has been twisted and gone wrong angle, that's less infuriating, but still not something we should have ended up seeing if they were legitimately trying to do right by these characters and abbreviated depiction of their tales.
As it undermines them by allowing such scenarios to be depicted in ways that act in opposition to their original form, despite supposedly traveling to the times in which they do. And those not familiar with the franchise who might have picked this game up thinking this twisted version as something which was legitimately in them, when it doesn't involve the Shixel idiots.
And due to the character journey being so critical for GU to work right, and it being so screwed up here, it's a bigger sin than it would be for the others, especially since GU had 3 adaptations of it before this game came out, where they did not fuck it up.
As this ends up becoming a story that entirely runs off the premise of an unlikable self-insert character that's here to solve everyone's problems for them by taking their stories away from them.
In other words, you broke the cardinal rule of this kind of crossover and team-up. Never denigrate one character or set of heroes to promote and glorify another when it goes against what they were shown being.
Once again, that's the reason I didn't like a fair chunk of the 4 Coma strips that had Kite as part of the GU's events, and in part one of my condemnations of Tabby. They subverted the story of the protagonists.
Except in this case, it's not limited to just one entry, but almost every plot-critical moment from the damn series up to that point, because that is what the game is built around. I may have an affinity for GU's part of the franchise in excess of a lot of fans, with good reason, but it's not just GU which has the feeling of being screwed over to favor Tokyo.
This also ends up along the lines of the same critiques I have of the works of Shoji Onomura when his stories involve characters he is wholly unfamiliar with. He ends up doing wrong by them in egregious ways from ignorance, yet doesn't appear to give a damn.
But what's damning here is, as I said before, this was done by the people that have been on this franchise since the beginning, so there's less excuse for this.
However, countenancing this is some other sub-events you eventually unlock, that works to confirm some fan stuff and see some cross-era interactions. And to use GU as the example again, after you clear the other areas, when they reenact the meeting with Shino, there's an expansion on Haseo going after Adley that organically leads into dialogue spoken between them during Adley's wedding event.
Yes, it is considered the canon ending, bitches. I would like to thank Link for that, but due to everything that comes before that and getting to it, the AIs which are reflecting such are no longer representative of those individuals. Unless, they're playing out something that is considered to have happened before, and thus confirming that interpretation. It works if you ignore how Link depicted the characters and sub in their canon versions. My headcanon is at this point in time, they're dating while going to college.
Another I thought was well executed was an event chain focused around Pyros' animosity with Mia.
Remember the time she gave him bugged items as pranks?
That transitions to the GU era and him meeting with Endrance, leading to Mia's temporary revival and a final prank on Pyros III which turns him red, carrying on the tradition and whatnot, and in far better spirits.
And I will admit, partying with the first era characters in a combat system more reflective of the GU entries was an initial draw when I started the game. However, Link's combat system is inferior to the one in GU, and by proxy the core games, and quickly becomes tedious. And this is a thing every professional reviewer of the game slammed, and slammed hard.
Cross-Rengekis are annoying to trigger, despite being awesome in concept and depiction. As first, you need to build a morale gauge that only raises from this stupid-as-all-hell bouncing timing minigame.
And seriously, can timing minigames go away? They're really not in any way a show of skill or strategy, simply reaction time. And I'm not just saying that because my reaction time sucks.
And the R-button ability menu is not as intuitive as it used to be with a simple 4-button mapping it was. Then you need to stagger them explicitly with more basic attacks to do any type of reasonable damage regardless of the bouncing minigame or cross-Rengeki does not endear me at all. Convoluting something that before was simple but very effective to the point it becomes uninteresting to play.
A battle system I can relate to the Fabula Nova Crystallis' stagger nonsense. You're dangerously low on points as it is, Link.
Before people bring up Protect Break in the original games, outside of the Cursed Wave and data-bugged enemies, you were under no obligation to use Data Drain, and good damage rates against such were reliant on you triggering the attack as it is here. Especially as it is extremely rare that you will do more than 1 or 2 points of damage to an enemy when they are anywhere near your actual level. Even after I got Tokyo over 10 levels above the suggested level for the event, it was rare to see damage numbers that got higher than a 5, against even common enemies. Meaning you are reliant on that stupid minigame I am awful at and triggering cross-Rengekis, especially if you want to collect any of the game's various types of currency from getting the high scores for the levels. In each area you also have an affection mini-event with each party member, which is supposedly based on an aspect of their character, and are hit and miss on that.
For example, do not party with Mistral. Her sub-party event attempts to recreate her inconsistent presence in the series, from her being an expecting mother, by her leaving the party with regularity to buy superfluous items. Obviously, one is not equivalent to the other, and sadly, some other characters like Alberio take after her. As a result, you can't charge the chain gauge that results in cross-Rengekis, which is needed for all this other stuff you lose out on now because of that, meaning you tend to have to replay areas you go to with her for them, when you even can replay them, which you often can't, unless you've previously obtained a sufficient stockpile.
And because properly triggering cross-Rengekis while the in-area affection meter you see on the left of the screen is high is the only way of raising the affection rating with party members, it's a major hindrance. Not all of them are like that. Most of them just want you to kill enemies at a specific amount of time that you are likely to fail at because your damage output is so amazingly low, unless you've already grinded your character to the point you don't even need a party member in the first fucking place because they're so below you in related level, which in turn undermines the symbolisms inherent to the cross-Rengeki system, of you forming bonds with these depictions of the franchise's characters, and that bond creating a power in multitudes of either alone.
At least it would, but the only thing you get from affection raising is a slightly larger hitbox in the Bounce the Monster QuickTime event. The NPC party members don't in any way get more intelligent like they did before.
Though I will give the developers credit, being able to map things aside from the class specialty attacks as was done in GU is advantageous, as is all of the character classes redesignated to GU character classes for the sake of simplicity. But the scrolling menu that replaces it is not good, as the battle does not stop when switching what's on it, so you could be left flat-footed while trying to get a healing item, and thus kills you, especially as it is limited to 4 slots, and they could have just done the button mapping as they did before in GU, that is quick, efficient, and not a detraction to this all being in real time. And as you don't learn more attacks or spells, merely get the same 2 upgraded and swap in or out items from the remaining slots, there's no real strategy in planning out what you map to the 4 bindings past keeping what you need the most in large quantities. Character leveling, while I like that almost everyone can get an X form like Haseo's,
and I love the designs for many of their X forms, especially Kite and Natalie. Major kudos there. And a lot of the design revisions for the game look really good as well.
Hell, they removed my one complaint about Haseo's X form, the discs covering his butt, and as replacement, gave him just plain awesome hardlight wings. I could totally believe this version embracing the identity of the Angel of Death. Oh, and Kite's X-form gives him 2 swords he can combine into a bow that can also be used as his own advanced data drain. That's just awesome.
I could legitimately go on about how great most of the revisions look from design and practicality standpoints, along with making the characters that have shared character models, such as Black Rose and Mimiru, Subaru and Cowton the Chaotic PK, yeah, she's here, and Natalie and Shino look more distinct in ways that are reflective of their canon personas.
Though why Sakaki is a playable character and part of the Twilight Knights when he was the real villain of GU is anyone's guess. Yeah, he looks stupid. But it takes forever to even get to that point. First needing to rank up everyone using virus cores that you acquire from the scoring menu after you fight through an area which gives you random amounts of 3 specified cores. Then, the individual X-forms can only be obtained after Tokyo unlocks his own X-form after you complete Roots' storyline, which is after more than half of the game's content has been completed, as there's a bigger focus on the first era events, since they're all standalone but interconnected stories, versus GU's single cohesive, at least in theory since Roots screws things over on that, story. There's also a bug I had to iron out with monster targeting, that for some reason changing targets can accidentally get mapped to the same control as movement, so you might need to reset your PSP's control scheme several times to get rid of it.
In my case, it ended up returning intermediately, and made some tedious battles more difficult, as throughout the game, monster targeting would switch on its own to the nearest targets and not the one you were fighting before, which is difficult to manually untarget as there's no good way to auto-change targets here, meaning you will often lose the stagger rate on the preceding monster entirely, thus making it more annoying to get to the bouncing minigame and thus cross Rengeki.
Camera controls are also a right pain, as you have no control over changing the viewpoints in any way. And those are both bigger issues than you might think, as these were not problems in the 7 preceding games.
Which is not made any better by the level design.
While the preceding 7 games each had coding that allowed for the creation of unique maps depending on the area words with enemy types dependent on element, level, mapping, and end goal of the area to break up most of the monotony and keep people's attention alongside the story events, all of Link's are pretty much the same maps over and over and over again and quickly become tiresome.
And as I alluded to before, most of them you can only play through once.
I mean, okay, you can grind through the same 2 or 3 non-story progressive areas to try and grind affection and try to pad leveling, but as you've beaten the same map over and over and over again with no ability to seek out some original level maps which can become favorite attractions, you just want things to move on to the next event before you die of boredom. Especially as combat is the exact same actions over and over and over and over again, no matter what enemy you're facing, and what the boss monster is at the end of each and every area. Beat them down until Protect breaks with either mashing circle or triggering the skill gauge. Juggle whatever monster you bash in until you charge the Cross Rengeki gauge, and then use Cross Rengeki on the next target so you get bonus scoring that will give you the experience points fighting the monsters will not. Well, yes, it sounds similar to what you did in GU. There was strategy and timing, variable attack formations and spell variety, party dynamics, changeable equipment, weapon abilities and attack style, and adaptive switching of abilities to best attack weaknesses done in a manner that didn't overcomplicate things. Which is all absent here. The monsters die in the same ways, to the point you ask why even have the limited variety that's here.
And I do mean limited variety. There are about a dozen different monsters in this game that are only differentiated through color palette swaps at best. All of the preceding .hack games at least had some variety in the skin modeling of the various monster types past a color change, and had them possess different weaknesses to exploit along with how they'd be distributed. Here, it's the same damn thing for almost every battle and area.
Hell, you can't even claim it's more back to basics from GU's refinement, as it's missing the elements of the combat system that were built off of in the core games. even if you had to micromanage the party there for best effect. However, you still need to do the extra areas to obtain virus cores to rank up abilities for the characters, as these drop rates are minuscule, and you are still limited to holding only 50 items when you end up needing over a dozen of the varied cores per character. And with the roster, that amount is enormous! As physical stats don't really significantly improve, it's best to try and get support abilities. But once more, you come to discover that you have no control over those anyways, so there's no consistency in them triggering. Thus, once more, you end up wondering why you bothered.
Thus, the game revolves around a combat system that leaves you just plain uninvested in what's going on, and yet you need to pay attention to it for any type of speedy progression. I couldn't even pull out my copy of the collected works of Arthur Conan Doyle like I did to kill time while grinding in Lightning Returns. And I got through this entire book while grinding in Lightning Returns!
Additionally, due to a glitch in the translation as of recording this, going through email chains with the English patch can crash the game.
The translation team is aware of this issue, however, and intend to patch such by the time they reach the final stages of work on it. If they reach the final stages of working on it. With the number of teams that have tried to complete this game, I'm not holding my breath.
But if you see this vid before such is fixed, it can be worked around by switching over to the version of the game that lacks the English patch. Load your last save file, go through the emails, save again, and then switch back to the English patched version. Both of them read the same save file, so you shouldn't lose anything.
But if you're emulating it, you will be abusing the hell out of save states simply for safety of backups. But either way, for the time being, you lose out on being able to read the emails, which, as shown before in previous reviews, are supposed to fill in a lot of the character dynamic stuff the normal story progression doesn't have the time for, in a rather organic way thanks to the series' greater framing device. And even that is something this game fails at!
Though the turn the PSP so you can read the messages as if you were reading it on a phone, yeah, that's just stupid. Honestly, the email bug almost made me throw up my hands and quit the damn game before I figured out the way around it, as it popped up every time you finished an area. Those emails are required for story progression beyond building character investment, even if such is really damn shallow in this game. Such is also available by putting the various characters in special rooms on the base of operations, the Grand Whale, to see minor character dynamic events play out.
None of which have been translated yet.
There's no real side questing or any form of explanation to find neat and rare stuff either in the towns or the periods you visit. Your only option for side stuff is unlocking events of the side stories like going to AI Buster, Cell, and Trilogy's time periods to unlock Alberio, Midori, and the Beast of the Apocalypse, which isn't even a side quest either, as periodically the game locks out story progression if you don't do enough of them. Meaning, they're not side quests, they're actually mandatory.
Though, that's another thing. A bunch of the accessible timelines are not exactly canon. X-Forth is downright atrocious, and also straight out.
And yet its depiction of Kubiya is a fucking recruitable party member.
Trilogy's divergences throw it out of the usual canon for the series, though it's always been acknowledged as such, and everything in GU ignores how Roots depicted its backstory. So, how is everything conclusive if the Akashic Record is made up of the memories of the main timeline's events that have already passed?
It must be because we went back in time!
That is not how time travel works.
And yeah, this creates a huge plot hole concerning Shixel being name-dropped in conversation with Reiko Sayaki in Trilogy's second post-credit scene, if it exists in its own alternate timeline.
And this is why I say Japan is especially terrible with creating fiction involving time travel in access to other nations. I haven't had epileptic fits trying to figure out how this could possibly work in a sane manner since Final Fantasy XIII-2 and Lightning Returns. Though, I will admit, this technically isn't straight-up time travel, as the different eras traveled to are simulations. But the game sure as hell treats it as such repeatedly, and can't keep it straight that it actually is not.
And Tokyo can't seem to differentiate from the reality that all of these people he's meeting are nothing but AI facsimiles of real people reenacting things that already happened, and what is actually happening. As we are repeatedly showcased that we are supposed to side with him on this, over Saika telling him to keep his eyes on their goal. But Again, this conclusion is predilected on sections of the game that could explain this being left untranslated, but I really doubt an answer to everything is present in those sections with how much of the main story actually is available. Though that 13.2 analogy isn't that far off. The time period selector is rather identical to the Historia Crux in how it amalgamates multiple timelines that cannot cohesively exist together.
And bringing up memories of that atrocity is not helping things. Though it makes me wonder if 13.2 was somehow ripping Link off for its awful framing device. Link did release well before 13.2, after all.
Also because one of the paradox endings is pretty much Link in a nutshell, with that rampant AI digitizing the idiot protagonists as personal guards.
And believe it or not, the Historia Crux is more sanely arranged by going from first accessible to last accessible. Whereas in Link, it's all arranged by era, but bounces you between them regularly, so on occasion you don't realize what was made accessible once you've completed things.
But for all I know, both games' time systems are based on an even older game I've never encountered, like, I don't know, Chrono Trigger or something.
And yeah, I've not gotten to play Chrono Trigger yet, and I know I'm losing my nerd cred by saying that. It's on my list, I swear. But this ends up feeling like more of a bunch of hallways than Final Hallway 13.
Honestly, the best parts of the game are in the visual novel storytelling style they use to save data space on the UMD, as the style is pretty good and allowed for a lot of character expression through the various still images.
It's just sad the story is so stupid when not retreading and screwing up the good moments of the .hack franchise. I should probably get to Link's actual story instead of addressing all of the poor game mechanics and concepts, shouldn't I?